Hey guys, we're gonna switch things up today, and instead of giving you a movie review, I thought why not take the time to talk about my favorite current television shows. There are so many streaming platforms from Netflix, HBO, Amazon Prime, Hulu, to upcoming Disney Plus and Warner Brothers streaming service. There's so many, not to mention cable television. There's a lot of content out there. I do watch my fair share of television, and I thought why not talk about what are some of my current favorites. Now, I'm not going to include shows that have already ended. The shows I'm going to list as my current favorites are, in fact, current and still ongoing. But before we get going on my top 10 favorite shows, I do want to give a shout out to 3 of my favorites that did come to a close this year, and they were Game of Thrones, Orange is the New Black, and Veep. All 3 of them would have undoubtedly been on my top 10 list, but they have all come to their series finales. I loved these shows. I want to thank them for so many great years of storytelling and characters, and I will miss them and rewatch them and look back on them fondly. Now let's move into my top 10 favorites. We're going to start with my number 10 before we work my way up to number 1. And in my number 10 spot, we have Grace and Frankie on Netflix. I have been a fan of this show since season 1, and Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin are an unwavering delight to watch. This show is easy, and it's very heartfelt, it's funny, it's witty, and helplessly charming. The show has been on for 5 seasons, and prior to season 5, I would have probably included this show higher up on my list. Now that being said, even though the latest season, season 5, had its moments, I felt for the first time in its 5-year run that it missed the mark with several story points. And if this had been like season 2 or 3 of the series, I may not have included it on my top 10 list. But I need to reward the first 4 seasons nonetheless. And it's still endearing to watch these 2 on screen. And my hope is that they continue and eventually end this show on a high note. But I can't help but feel a little bit nervous about the overall quality of the show moving forward after a rather lackluster 5th season. But nonetheless, the first 4 seasons are good, and this duo is pure gold to watch no matter what. In my number 9 spot, we have The Boys on Amazon Prime. This show takes a premise of real superheroes living in the world and how complex, dirty, and corrupt a world like that could actually be. This is not your dad's Superman. The cast is believable, the multi-layered story expands in ways I wasn't expecting, and I appreciate that they didn't hold back on how dark and twisted these characters are, and especially all the politics involved behind the scenes that depict a world filled with heroes and how flawed and truly terrible they could be behind closed doors when the cameras aren't rolling. There are similarities between this show and Game of Thrones where it's hard to know who to root for at times between the so-called heroes and villains. Though I wouldn't call this show perfect, I was still impressed with how compelling and fresh this show was, and I'm excited to see where the story goes in the future. In my number 8 spot, we have Westworld on HBO. Now, this show has had 2 seasons, and I gotta say that season 2 definitely took a major dip down in story quality, and it was a bit too layered and complicated for its own good. But the futuristic sci-fi mystery premise of this show and the characters, for the most part, still keep me insanely engaged and curious to see where this could lead. Season 3 is said to be a game changer season and going in a completely different direction, which both excites me and worries me. I'm hoping that it recaptures the storytelling strength showcased in the first season, and only time will tell. Though the mystery got a little too convoluted for its own good, I'm still in this game to see where it unfolds going forward. In my number 7 spot, we have Shameless on Showtime, or for me, Netflix. Shameless has been in my life for 9 years now. Now, I still haven't caught the last season just yet. I will when it is released on Netflix, just because I don't have Showtime. But I have to give this show credit for maintaining its momentum. Sure, there have been a couple seasons not as good as others, but the actors continue to provide fantastic performances, some of which I think deserve way more recognition than they get. I'm looking at you, Emmy Rossum, and she is my number 1 reason why I love this show, especially with her journey and what she brings to the family dynamic. Yes, the comedy is outrageous. It's offensive, and you're constantly saying, did they just do that? All all the time. But the storylines continue to remain fresh enough where the show has yet to feel it's overstayed its welcome after 9 seasons. I'm excited to see season 9, even though I'm sad that it's Emmy Rossum's last season on the show, and my hope is that it's able to wrap up in the near future at the top of its game, because it's still going strong thus far. In my number 6 spot, we have 13 Reasons Why on Netflix. Now, I was hooked on this show from episode 1. It's another one of those mysteries that you can't put down and you need to find out what happens. I also feel that they handled the controversial and graphic messages involving suicide and rape very well. This show is graphic, but the message is important to get across, and I see no shame in what this show depicts, because the most important thing that it can do is bring awareness and start a conversation, especially for young people. Everyone has the freedom to watch or not watch, and I see no fault in portraying these horrific situations in a very real and brave way to get people talking. Not only is the story and message strong, but the actors bring their A game to this show with no weak link among them, and that can be hard with a teen-centered drama. Both season 1 and 2 are strong, with season 1 having the slight edge on 2 in my opinion, and I'm excited to see what other mysteries unfold in seasons 3 and 4, as we'll get in the future. In my number 5 spot, we have Sex Education. Oh my god, this gem of a show reminded me of the best high school comedy, romance, and drama told in the cleverest of ways. The pacing is quick, the characters are all so different and bring so much heart to this story that I fell in love. Sure, this show touches upon some narrative storylines that we've already seen before, but it's the strong script and incredible actors that raise the overall quality of the show to a 10. There's only been 1 season, but I'm officially calling Sex Education my favorite new show of 2019, and I cannot wait for season 2. And yes, it gets very explicit with all the talk and content involving sex, but I never felt it was distasteful, and I found most, if not all of it, quite hilarious. The show is spectacular, and I highly recommend it to anyone who loves a well-told coming-of-age story accompanied by good romance that doesn't feel cheesy and quick-witted comedy. In my number 4 spot, we have Big Little Lies on HBO. Why do I recommend this show? Well, the cast of extraordinary women in this show is worth your time alone. My personal favorites are, in order, Nicole Kidman, then Reese Witherspoon, and then Laura Dern. The first season of this show is so juicy, so mysterious, so layered that it hooked me so quickly, almost like a drug. The scandal in this show is handled tremendously by this cast, who all give award-winning performances, and even though I felt season 2 wasn't quite as strong as season 1, and that's the reason why it's not higher up on my list because of that, I still love these characters. So much, in fact, that I want to keep them in my life for as long as possible, despite any narrative flaws. And since we're not sure if we'll get a 3rd season or not, and they did not refer to the last episode of season 2 as a series finale, it's still included in my current list of ongoing shows for right now. All right, we are climbing to the top, and in my number 3 spot, we have The Handmaid's Tale. Wow, this show is dark and heavy, but it never fails to keep me engaged and involved in these characters and the continuous brutal journey of our main protagonist, played by Elizabeth Moss. The futuristic setting is still grounded in so much reality that it's scary to think that a horrific future like this is even remotely possible to our country. And that's another reason why this show continues to suck me in, along with the multi-layered characters depicted so well by its amazing cast. It's a survival journey, and one of those that you have to see through to the very end in order to find out if there's even a chance for escape. Love Handmaid's Tale. And in my number 2 spot, we have Stranger Things. 3 seasons in, and season 3 was one of the best seasons of television I've ever seen in my life, and it almost felt like an 8-hour movie. The characters and the 80s nostalgia hooked me in this show from the beginning, and I especially love how this show balances so many characters with compelling storylines. It does play with the line of how much scary and creepy I can personally handle, because I don't do scary at all, but fortunately the storytelling and the characters are enough to keep me engaged and get past the scary moments. And there were just a couple of narrative hiccups in the second season, but overall this show is the perfect blend of suspense, mystery, comedy, and adventure, with a perfect 80s setting that makes it feel familiar and nostalgic to that time period. And finally, in my number one spot, my favorite show currently is The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on Amazon Prime. Fast-paced, sharp, comedic dialogue with hilarious and clever stories filled with engaging characters. If you liked Gilmore Girls, or even Bunheads for that matter, and the unique charm and quick pacing of Amy Sherman Palladino's writing, she's the creator of all of these shows, along with her husband, you will love The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. It's had 2 seasons so far, and it's only getting better and better with each new episode, and it almost was a bit overwhelming how in love I was with this show, especially in season 2 and where it goes, where it progresses. It's like it put me under a spell with all of these characters, and the comedy is on point. It deserves every single award that it's being nominated for, and winning, I might add, along the way. And I'm honored and thrilled to include it as my number one favorite show currently right now. I cannot wait to see season 3. And that's my list of my top 10 current favorite shows right now across all television platforms. I am curious to hear your list. I'm curious to hear if some of your favorites made my list. Feel free to leave your thoughts and opinions down below. And thank you all again for tuning in. And until next time, I'm Ryan Boehme, signing off. Bye, everyone.